Good afternoon to everyone, and thank you for inviting me to speak to you today about data and making data-driven decisions. So, my name's Matt Rogers, and currently I'm a Customer Success Director for Gartner Talent Neuron. Lots of you will have heard of Gartner, and I'll go into what Gartner do in just a minute, but I thought it would be useful for everyone here to hear a little bit about me and what I've done with my career and why I'm speaking to you today. So I've spent the last 20 years working with data in various different ways. I started off straight out of university working for a job site where I was inputting data into the job site. Worked my way up as a business analyst within an organization where we heavily use the data to look at target groups, industries, sales performance, marketing, and then I set up a venture with a colleague of mine, and for the last 15 to 16 years, I've been running a network of job sites. So I was in charge of various different teams, sales teams, marketing teams, IT teams, customer service teams, and the continuity amongst all of them was the use of data. No decision was made within the organization without it being backed up by data. There was no knee-jerk gut reactions, and that's how, as a relatively small organization, we were able to really disrupt the market and get quite a market share for the niche sites that we ran. So since then, I have moved to Gartner, and specifically Talent Neuron within Gartner. And I'll come on to in just a second what Talent Neuron is. A lot of you would have heard of Gartner and know Gartner as the world's leading research and advisory company. We work across every major business function. We've been going for a long time. 1979 we were founded. Many associates worldwide, over 100 office locations around the world. We serve professionals across, like I said, across all of the business functions, from small companies to global companies to multinational enterprises. So just to give some context, 73% of the global 500 rely on Gartner for insight and advice, and a lot of that is based on data and information that we gather. So within these business functions, I primarily sit within human resources, and that's it's HR departments that I connect with. That's HR departments of my members. They're the clients where I provide them data and help them with their mission critical priorities and business decisions. So, what is data-driven decision making? Well, simply put, it's the practice of collecting data, analyzing it, and basing decisions on insights derived from the information. So this process itself contrasts sharply with making decisions based on gut feeling, instinct, traditional theory. Data-driven decisions are more objective and can easily be evaluated according to their impact on metrics. So, and a lot of you will be aware of what data-driven decision making is. It's obvious when you say it out loud, but it really is that idea of just backing up the decisions you're making. It's there to add context and layers and make sure you are actually going in the right direction and not just shooting from the hip and basing things on gut feeling. So when we talk about data, it's crucial that we're not just providing people with reams of data to analyze and go through. The data has to be collected, visualized, presented in the correct way. and that's usually different every single time, depending on who you're collecting the data for and who you're presenting it to. So first, we need to generate the insight. Here you can see a typical analysis workflow. And these are 4 steps to determine the right data to tell that story. And telling a story is crucial when it comes to data. You have to be able to hang your hat on that story, and make sure that the data you provided is worthy of what you're trying to get across, the point you're trying to back up. So, to give you an example, and I'm talk about, because I sit in HR, a lot of my examples are going to come from that, and I'll be talking about talent advisors and talent analytics. When I talk about talent, I'm talking about employees and candidates, people, potential employees and candidates within the labour market. Talent analytics isn't any different to any other sort of data intelligence teams across the business. So first off, you have to make sure you get to the root of the question or the problem you're trying to solve. This is absolutely crucial, to make sure that you can provide the statistics and metrics that you need, and getting to the core of what the actual problem is of the stakeholder. So if you take this hiring manager, for example, who's conducted 5 on-site interviews for a particular role, the hiring team, they possibly have got a couple of good candidates to put forward, but the hiring manager wants him to shop for more. They want more candidates. They want to see more. Now, in the old world, a recruiter or a sourcer, as they're often known, when they've been in the role for a long time, they have a feeling when it's a hard job to fill. They, from experience, they know it's a hard job to fill, and they can go to the hiring manager and say to them, look, the lists of needs, of requirements you've given us, we're not going to be able to find that. We've had a look, we can't find it. But the hiring manager is going to push back on that. There's no evidence, there's no data to back that up, and that is what the recruiters, that's what they need to get to. So within our organisation, we're trying to create advisors, not recruiters, advisors. They could advise the hiring manager on what they need to do. So what's very important when you're trying to collect data is that you're going for the right data. You need to identify the sources. So the first port of call is to identify the sources you have. So look internally as a business, see what you have, see what is available, what your current workforce, what that looks like. Quite often you can see what you have on file from candidates that have applied for previous roles, for example. Quite often the search stops there, and companies, they're very insular, and they're not outward looking, and that's where you go. But once you've identified that, you then have to identify other sources, and that's where you have to look at externally. You have to look outside of yourself to get the right data. So you need to go to the market. You have to get that information, understand that what the hiring manager is asking for is possibly unrealistic, and find data to back up why that is. So what pushbacks are you going to have? You have to understand your sale. What pushbacks are you going to get from your hiring manager, from whoever it is that's asking you to get this data, or whoever it is that's asking you to do something within a business? What pushbacks are you going to get? It's important for you to understand that. Then you can get the right data, the right information, get the trends and the patterns to help demonstrate the optimal solution. So you can present that in front. So you're not just presenting your feelings, your gut instincts, your theories. You're actually backing that up with solid evidence. And here are some of the key reasons why I'm confident we have interviewed the best of the best and this market has to offer because of X, Y, and Z. like I said, it's so important to understand your stakeholders. You need to make sure that whoever is putting in this request, whether it's within HR, um, within IT or finance or wherever it is, you have to sit with your stakeholder and you have to totally understand who it is you are speaking to. What, how will you need to flex your communication style? Um, what is the best way to understand your audience? It really is to understand these key questions. Who is it you're speaking to? What are their business priorities and concerns? How do you anticipate your stakeholders will use the information you present? How comfortable are your stakeholders with data? And what communication styles do your stakeholders prefer? These are crucial. You can't just receive an email from someone saying what you need. You have to go. You have to sit with that person, have a meeting with that person, get inside their head and realize what are they trying to solve. It may well be that the bigger there's a bigger question here. So you need to understand that. You need to understand where this particular request sits in their business priorities. Um, and and how are they going to use the data when you give it back to them? Is it for them, just personally, internally, to use and analyze, or will they be presenting this to a team or to a board or to external partners, whoever it may well be? And if they're presenting that and they're having to talk about it, how comfortable are they with data? How detailed do you have to be? Or you have to get the right visualizations right. And then what communication style does your stakeholder prefer? So when you're giving the data back to them, you need to understand how that conversational style needs to be. How is it a conversational style, or is it anecdotal, or do they want it to be analytical and database? So these are all questions that you really need to get on top of right at the start of gathering the data that you need to answer the questions asked of you. And then it's presenting your findings, telling your story, how you communicate your insights. It's all well and good to go out and gather data, and there is lots and lots of data that you can gather to answer any particular question. But how much do you use? It's very important to select only the data that is most critical to support your teaching point. Too much data will be very overwhelming very quickly, and people will turn off from it. You need to show your data and explain your teaching point, and you need to do this. You need to meet with your stakeholder again and go through this together. It has to be displayed in a visually compelling, simple format. It is important to acknowledge any data you don't have or you couldn't get, but I can't stress how important it is to be very mindful of having too much data and overly sophisticated data. It's one thing if you're presenting the data back to a data scientist, for example, who's very used to using data day in, day out, and they can go into sheets and use VLOOKUPs and pivot tables and whatever it is they need against someone who really isn't comfortable with that, and maybe they just need the visualization to be able to tell them the story, a simple visualization. This isn't a new thing. This is something that has been happening for hundreds of years. How you visualize data. A very good example, if you go back to the times of the Crimean Wars and Florence Nightingale, there was she discovered very, very quickly that soldiers weren't actually dying from battle wounds on the field. They were dying from poor sanitary conditions within hospitals. They were picking up illnesses and viruses and infections and things from poor sanitation and cleanliness. She was able to create quite a stunning visualization. It's got a Nightingale coxcomb table, and you can go and have a look at this afterwards. But it very, very clearly outlaid it just in one slide exactly by month, how many of the soldiers were dying from wounds and bad sanitation, infections picked up after surgery, things like this. And as a result, radical changes were made, and the mortality rate from wounded soldiers plummeted. It was an amazing presentation. So that's why it's important to understand who you're presenting the data to and how you can translate that data across to those people. Now, as I said, I work for Talent Neuron within Gartner. We're almost a business within a business. Gartner Talent Neuron, we combine big data and statistical insights to provide global talent, location, and competitive intelligence for any industry or function. We can help you make data-based talent decisions that support your organization's mission-critical priorities. And how do we do this? So, as an organization, we gather supply and demand data. And like I said earlier on in the presentation, we deal predominantly with HR departments, HR function within organizations. So we're dealing with talent. That's that's what we're dealing with on any given requisition. So we gather talent supply and demand data from over 65,000 global sources. And when I talk about sources, I'm talking about secondary sources. So this is publicly available data that anyone can go and access. Yes, some of it's paid for, absolutely, but anyone can pay a subscription, or it is just publicly available for free. We're not a primary source. We don't do interviews, telephone calls. We're not on the ground. It's big data. It's directionally very, very accurate, the data we receive. And we get this from sources, and you can see the list here, from corporate recruiting sites such as your own, job boards, trade publications, government publications, university portals and data, research networks, any proprietary databases we have, surveys, patents, federal, state and local census data, corporate filings, government organizations, our own Gartner insights, of which we have an abundance, and also social media platforms. And when I say that, it's like professional business platforms. And then once we have the data, we continuously test the data for quality and accuracy. We have a massive team of data scientists and labor economists who continuously review and validate the reports and the data we receive. Appropriate changes are made in the data and analysis based on their findings. We deduplicate data as well, so that we're not providing sort of false or misinformation. And we leverage internal and external partnerships across the globe to cross-validate regional data and trends. So, with all that, if you ever use Talent Neuron, we can equip you with access to over 4,000 individual locations in 150 plus countries, 1.5 billion candidate profiles, that's what we have, 120 million companies, 13,000 plus universities, 30,000 separate skills, 4 billion job ads that we have collected over, well, more than a decade, and 850 million salary data points. So, using Talent Neuron, this is how you can prepare, plan, and advise using our talent analytics. So we break off into three main areas. It's talent intelligence, location intelligence, and competitive intelligence. All of it is with data. We provide data within each of these segments to allow you as an organization to make the most informed and market-driven sense decisions that you can make. They could be to help you benchmark your diversity needs, to create long and short-term sourcing plans, to build talent advisor capabilities. And I'll come back to those two just a little bit further on in the presentation. We help identify locations so you can consolidate footprint. We can help you find hidden talent pools, so help you find those places that may not look like it's got a big supply of relevant talent, but we can see that the growth has been there, the investment is there. Startups are, drawn there. There's big investment for those startups. We can optimize location by cost. It's always very important. Analyze your competitor hiring trends. Discover who your new competition for key talent is. Your competition now isn't. Everyone says everyone's an IT company now. Your competition may not be your standard telco competitors that you've always known them to be. So we can help you identify those competitors that are going after the same critical talent that you are, and that's very, very important for companies, because they're used to looking within their own industries, and that just simply isn't the case anymore. We can help you understand market disruptors. We can, like I said, pinpoint emerging roles and skills. So we can not only find the locations, but we can see from the demand side data that we have those roles and skills that have been emerging quickest and paired together quickest to create new skills. And then we can help you forecast for your future workforce. So it's phenomenal with workforce planning. We can help you. We can help look into your AI and see what's happening there. We can look at your individual role. One of our newest use cases is the future of the workforce, where we can take individual roles of yours and actually break them down by segmented skills and tasks, and allow you to understand by role what percentage or what tasks within that role are could be highly automated. And then with that result, you can take those repeatable, redundant tasks off of your staff and reskill that staff. You can create whole new career paths for that staff. It allows you to be way more agile. And this is what digitalization does. It allows you as an organization to be more agile and flex and be able to grow from within as well. So these are all the areas that we help organizations as Talent Neuron. So if I go into a couple of examples as to helping with data-driven decision making, I'll go through one example that it sort of frequently comes up for us within Talent Neuron, and then I'll go into a specific example that I went through myself with Deutsche Telekom. So, as I've said previously, we deal predominantly with HR departments and talent acquisition departments, where we're dealing with a lot of recruiters. And recruiters now, they're facing new challenges and priorities. Today's market is a rapidly changing market. Hiring is becoming way more complex due to evolving roles, high competition, and demanding hiring managers. You can see here that demand is just totally outstripping supply for critical talent, and then the time to actually fill those critical roles is increasing. And a lot of the time is because the roles are unfamiliar to recruiters. They're brand new skills, brand new roles. They don't know where to look. They don't know where the best talent is, because 2 or 3 years ago, that role or that skill itself, it just did not exist. You only have to look at things like data scientists and how cloud and things like that is being used now. Those roles, they just did not exist in the marketplace until very recently. So this is a new dawn. This is something you can't just trust your gut and think this is where I go to get that person, because I've always done that. For the past 10 years I've been doing this. That is what I've done. Well, you can't. You need the data to back that up now. And if you're not using the data, there's a real chance that you could be making very misplaced talent decisions, and those are extremely costly. You can see here the example, and at the moment, people that aren't using data, the workforce plans are totally ineffective. And you can see here, just 30% of organisations consider themselves effective at drafting workforce plans because people aren't looking at planning; they're looking at reacting. They're reacting to business needs. They're not being proactive to market trends. And that's the real difference. You can be proactive to market trends if you're using the data of the market. If you're just reacting to what the business thinks it needs, then you're never going to keep up. And you see here, ahead of recruiting, no matter what we do, training, contractors, pipelining, we just can't seem to keep our heads above water for more than a moment when it comes to critical hires. And that's because it's these new roles, they're evolving so quickly. And again, these are comments when data is not driving the conversation. These are comments we have from our talent advisors, our recruiters, our sources. Hiring managers, excuse me, hiring managers believe that if I interview enough people, I will find the right people. And it's hard to discourage that mentality. You know, it's totally unrealistic expectations to think that there's just an infinite amount of people out there. I mean, shouldn't we make sure first of all that we're inviting the right people to interview? Shouldn't we make sure that those people actually exist out there? You know, there's a thought from hiring managers that it is still 2008 and they can just hire anyone they want. They can put down as many uh, needs and must-have experience that or skills as they want. It's just not realistic in the marketplace. And as a recruiter, you need to understand that. You need to go out there and look within the labour market to see what that is actually looking like. So this is where Talent Neuron comes in, and it really does help to shift the mindset of recruiters. You know, it really does help shift the mindset of the hiring managers. We show the recruiters how to shift that mindset. Um, Sorry, I said shifting the mindset of the recruiters. It's the hiring managers. That's the mindset we need to shift. It's the recruiters we need to turn into advisors. So you can see here on the left-hand side, this is a needs-driven approach. This is being very reactive to the business. And on the right-hand side, we're looking at market-driven. And that's where we need to be. So we need to get away from needs-driven sourcing and get into market-driven sourcing. We need to not think of ourselves as recruiters. They need to be, you know, talent advisors. They need to use the external market expertise and business acumen to challenge hiring manager assumptions, frame requisitions strategically, and drive for impact. They can't just take everything. They can't be order takers. They can't just take everything from a hiring manager and believe that that is the way it's going to be, because that's not realistic. It's, to put the example into the real world and the situation we've all probably dealt with. It's like putting a checklist down for buying a house, and you might have 15 must-have requirements that includes being close to a good school, having a big garden, a driveway, a garage, and 2 bathrooms. I don't know, a conservatory, whatever it may well be. And realistically, hitting all of those check boxes is going to be impossible. So you need to go out. You need to go and have a look and see what is out there. Look at your locations and see if that house exists. And if it doesn't, what houses do exist? How close can you get to it? Or possibly you're looking in the wrong locations. Do you do away with the locations and then just look at the house and see what locations actually flag up based on that? It's no it's no different here. You have to go away into the market and have a look at whether this person actually exists with all these skills. Um, is this long list of must-have skills? Is it one job, or should it actually be split into two? Are most organisations splitting this role into two, and filling it that way? It's very it's very interesting way to look at it. Um, you can see here location driven recruiting. That we need to get away from location driven recruiting. We can't be saying, this is our location. We need to find the staff. We need to find their staff. It has to be skills driven. We have to flag the locations that are most prevalent for our critical skills. And that is what's happening. Um, this is what people have to do. Um, it's getting away from responsive recruitment and moving into predictive recruitment. We need to use the labour market intelligence to inform the business what it needs. So why use data for market-driven sourcing? Well, compared to needs-driven sourcing, market-driven sourcing results in significant cost savings and recruiter efficiencies. And you can see here, the reason we would want to take the market-driven strategy in comparison to the needs-driven strategy is 91% more prospects interviewed for critical roles. And that breaks down, you can see here, to 20% fewer critical roles are open for 5 or more months, which results in a 22% increase of hire per year. And the cost savings there are just staggering. You can see here, and this is from analysis that we've done as Gartner. I mean, this is it's obvious why data for market driven sourcing works, and the benefits they're there for all to see. It changes hiring manager behaviors. Decisive hiring managers hire 10% more high quality candidates and 11% fewer low quality candidates than typical hiring managers. So we provide recruiters with key external labour market insights to help drive the decisive hiring managers to define the needs for the workforce of the future. And that's the point. We're looking at the workforce as a whole. We're looking at the future. We're trying to be market driven. We're doing all of this with data. We're going back to the business and we're telling them what they need to keep up, to get ahead, to find the best locations, the best skills, the best talent, to understand what their competitors are doing. It's all done with data. And that data is there to reinforce, to inform, to analyze, and to ultimately act upon. Now, if we look at a more specific example, the Deutsche Telekom themselves. So this is a project I actually worked on with Deutsche Telekom, and I had a conversation with my stakeholders there. They came to me with this problem. They wanted to identify locations that will bring a significant cost reduction versus the cost in Germany now, which still has good availability of technical skills typical for the telco world. So they were understanding that Germany was becoming very costly, and they wanted to know what location was best. They wanted to do that by the skills, and that's exactly the way to look at it. It's important to look at your core skills, and then break that down by looking in the external labour market, and that's what we did. That's what we went out, we analysed, and we produced a report that gave them actionable information on the talent supply, the talent demand, the cost of that talent, the language proficiency, and the attrition rates in those locations. So this is the agreed sort of parameters and information that we talked about delivering. We had a conversation right at the start. Like I said, I spoke to my stakeholders to understand how this data was going to be used, at what levels was it going to be used. Was it for presentations, or did they need the data to be able to look at different scenarios, to be able to manipulate the data, play around with the data to show different outcomes? And it was the latter. They did want it in that way, and this is what was delivered. This is part of what was delivered. You can see here, this is our ratings page that was delivered, and we've broken everything down by those parameters. You can see here towards the bottom of the screen the talent supply analysis, the cost analysis, um, the roles, and for each role we went through, we were given all of the skills and requirements. So our search was based specifically on the skills and requirements of those roles for Deutsche Telekom. Um, and then the interesting thing, you see right at the top, the assigned weights by parameter. We allowed them to have a talent priority rating, a cost priority rating, and a balanced rating. Now, for all of those, they can change the percentage weights. So they can change the supply analysis and the cost analysis to reflect what they were thinking. They can look at particular roles. They can give an equal weighting to all roles, or they could look at one role in particular by changing the percentage weights next to the roles here towards the bottom of the right hand side. And then once they've done that on the weightings page, we show them the ranking and the rating summary. Um, so this is showing them the talent priority rankings, the cost priority rankings, and the balance rankings. Um, I also wanted to show you there the language proficiency and attrition that we had in there as well for each of the locations. So this was just an overlay of a bit more data to just give them that little bit more information of making a decision. So I mean, I'm sort of drawing to the end of the actual presentation itself, but hopefully that has been somewhat informative as to how I look at using data to drive decision making, how we help organisations use data. I've given you some examples of within the typical recruiter, the talent advisor model. I've shown you an example from Deutsche Telekom themselves. So I'm not saying that data is replacing everything. Is data has been around for, like I said, I'll give you the Florence Nightingale example. It's been around for generations. It's just we need to leverage it. We need to look outside of ourselves. We need to take a complete view. We need to break down those barriers. We need to become more agile as companies. Digitalization is a massive thing that most companies are going through right now, and being agile is absolutely imperative. But you need to be able to make decisions quickly, and having data and having access to data is so important from that point of view. So if you do have data intelligence teams, then make sure that with it, whatever function you're sat in, that you're speaking to them, you're getting having the right conversations. They're understanding your needs, and that they're actually finding the external needs for the business. All of this is so important. There obviously has to be a human element to read the data, understand the data, make decisions on the data. This is just one part of that decision making process, but it's a big part of driving towards making those decisions. I do have to apologise that this is a recording you're listening to. I did absolutely want to be there live in person to speak to you all. Due to unforeseen circumstances, I cannot be, so wanted to give you this recording instead. But my contact details, email address are within this presentation, and you can you can speak to the facilitators of the presentation who've set up this session to, if you want to reach out to me directly to ask me any questions about what I've talked about. I'm happy to have any conversations that come out of this. Not a problem at all. Well, have a good rest of your afternoon, and I hope this has been informative for you. Thank you.